when I think about this one, three things come to mind. One is that most organizations and individuals, when taking on a transformation or evolution, haven't thought about or don't understand the magnitude or the amount of change it's going to take to be successful to adopt or evolve from their current state into a DevOps future state. The second one is that culture is key to be successful. It's required, the transformation requires transformational leaders. So currently, most of the organizations are led by transaction-based leaders. And this is primarily generated, or generational, just due to the multi-faceted workforce that we have in place today. And the tide is turning. We should say, the transformationalists, we're evolving to be more transformational. But the challenge becomes, can the organization wait? Or, the timing of that. And so that's something that I find that each client organization is different in their timing of how they're going to handle that. And then third is, to be successful, that the organizations, they need to be dynamic, iterative, in mindset, how they think and operate. Also, their organizational structure, they have to have a networked organizational structure led by autonomous self-powered teams. So when you reflect upon points 2 and 3, having that culture change, having the different organizational structure and a different way of working, you can see why the number one challenge that I see is the underestimation of the amount of change or transformation. So it's the fear to be bold, fear to be committed, fear of being decisive, and having the discipline to stay the course of change and truly evolve. So what I mean by that is it's a marathon, not a sprint, is what I work with individuals and my clients and organizations. And then when they start down the path, when something unforeseen happens, the typical response or what's comfortable is to go back to, okay, we tried this, we've done this before, we've worked in this manner before. And it's a tendency to do that. Well, this is where once you start down this journey of true adoption, that you want to stay the course, because if you go back to the old tendencies, which is what you're trying to evolve from, you're allowing the old ways, the old culture to continue. So the other piece of this is going to be, the other trend is, I'm going to say it, on an individual basis, the change is going to hit. The organization is going to hit individuals at different times, at different points, and they're going to have different realizations or self-realizations about the evolution that's taking place. And so it's interesting because, from the CEO to the lowest person in the food chain or in the organizational structure, they're going to have that day of reconciliation where I'm used to being static or traditional, and now I'm being dynamic in DevOps. And so to do that, people are going to have a reaction, and everybody handles the ability to change or the stress of changing differently. So those are the two primary things that I'm seeing from a trend perspective. So the pitfalls or success factors is, before the transformation begins, to work with your HR or human resources group and the leaders of the organization as a whole to set the policies, the rules for change. What's the meaning, meanings and definitions and standards of, what's expected. Be clear and concise about the requirements and the metrics that are going to be used. The rules of engagement, we'll call it, for the transformation, and how you're going to get from that current state to future state. So once those are in place, then the second piece of that is, as the transformation is progressing, having that zero tolerance or non-condoning of thinking, behavior, and actions that are not supportive of the transformation. not putting in that new culture, being resistive and going back to the ways of working, trying to stay in the current state. So having that game plan and being able and having the discipline and fortitude to walk that through. Those are to me, the organizations that are proactive on that and do that up front, those are the most successful. So organizations need a third party, I'm going to call it a third party objective person or resource. I think this is mentioned in the ELF conference in one of our questions. One of our experts were talking about this, where what the coach does is it provides the standards, because we've trained them, our coaches, to have the skills to communicate and collaborate and ensure across the organization, all the way up and down the hierarchy and across the organization, across different, into different groups, into different demographics, into different areas of the company or organization, to have the tool set to be able to work with the folks in the trenches and the leadership, and to provide them the ability to understand what are the standards and then how to help them apply them to their real world situation. Just trying to think here. The key with the Devops coach is that they're trained to handle a wide variety of situations. And so in the transformations are complicated. And so you're gonna need that coach. So, sometimes they take on many different characteristics. They're a mentor, they're a trainer, they're a facilitator, they're a shoulder to lean on, all these different emotions as people are going through all this in the organization. So having that coach there to be able to understand the situation or what's going on at that moment in time, and then applying what your organization needs and more importantly, what your people and individuals need to be successful at that point in time. That to me is the significance of the coaching role. And so to sum it up, the coach to me is that bonding agent of the nucleus of the transformation. So basically your core team of you and your organization are leading the transformation. And then as you proliferate throughout the organization, that coach becomes that integration piece, or the person that makes sure that things are keeping held together. So my direct answer is yes, that organizations should have an internal coaching capability. However, what my experience has been is that it's a mixed bag, meaning the situation and timing of how aggressive or what the organization wants to do for its transformation, that sort of dictates what the end result is. Historically, and the trend that I see that's most successful is that you want to get the most passionate individuals in your organization. Now, notice I said most passionate. I didn't say most politically correct or highest in the food chain in power, or having these credentials, or the longest tenure in the company. You really want people that are all about transformation. Their passion is truly transformation at the individual level, and then transforming an organization, going, the organization as a whole. And so finding those individuals, regardless of where they're at in the hierarchy or where they're in the organization, pulling them together as the nucleus, that's key. And then from those passionate transformation individuals, bring in a DASA Devops coach, bring in a consultant, somebody that's done transformations before or has been through the journey that you believe that you and your company are about to go on, that meshes well or fits well with your team, that nucleus team, and then have the coach and the transformation consultant be that safety net or mentor, trainer, facilitator to help get things going. And then as time progresses and the transformation moves on, then you can sort of, wean or, have less hours with the coach or with the transformation agent as you build that capability inside. And that to me is what I found is in today's world is the winning combination. The reason why simply this is new for everyone. So the caution here is that if you find somebody that says, hey, I've done it all, been here, done this, chances are that's a red flag, because these adoptions and these transformations are complex. And yes, people like myself have been doing this for 2 decades. The way that we're doing it today organizationally and putting all the pieces together according to the aligning to the DASA standards holistically, this is relatively new. And so it requires a lot of, some people would say art more than a science. So that to me is that's the formula for how to build that capability internally. So the short answer is it's a requirement. Simply stated, it's required. So the question I would like to ask folks is, what does DASA's 6 core principles and transformational leadership, the 4 values and 12 principles of Agile all have in common? The answer to that is a very similar value and belief set. There's no other leadership style like transformational leadership that aligns more closely with DevOps, Agile, Lean, these dynamic ways of thinking, working, because it's a mindset. It's a way to think, which translates into how you operate, and they're all based on the same value and belief set. So one of the key things about a transformation leader is being a change agent. It goes with the territory. Same thing with the leader leading. Notice I'm not saying manage. The leaders of Agile, Lean, and DevOps transformations, they're all change agents. Because you're evolving culture. Most time, you're evolving culture. You're changing people, process, tools. It's always about, these transformations are all about change. And so, being a transformational leader and having that, understanding that skill set, that's why it's required, because you are that change agent. And this goes back to, if we go back to the very first question about, what's the number one? I think it was, what am I seeing out there? And experience of doing this goes back to the understanding or misunderstanding about the amount of change that's required. And this is a sort of validates or is a example of one piece of why that's the number, why people underestimate the amount of change that's about to happen in their transformation. When we start a transformation, when I'm with my clients in starting a transformation, there's typically 3 questions that we ask or I ask of them. Who makes what decisions today? Where does the decision making have to be when we are operating by a DevOps model? And then list why. The whys. Why is it important? Why those decisions have to be made, and sort of create that map. We'll call that a decision making map. Like a heat map, call it a decision-making map. The second question is going to be, can you and your organization define and execute a zero-tolerance policy, regardless of who is the person not following the policy, which includes everyone, including the C-level executives, suppliers, vendors, contractors, consultants, etc. And then go on to map out or outline, draft out how you would be successful in defining and executing that zero tolerance policy. The third question is going to be, what is the maximum level or amount of change you and your organization have the appetite for? What are you willing to go through or believe can be endured during the adoption or transformation journey? List specific examples with the maximum limits and the metrics or way the change is going to be measured or quantified. So why would I ask those 3 questions? Well, the answer is I want to be thought-provoking. I want you to get out of you and your organization, to get out of your comfort zone right now while you're thinking about, or as you're trying to plan, to get in some level of insight into that number one that we had at the very start of our questioning, which is, what is the number one thing I see out there, which is the amount of change, transformation and change that at the individual level, at the organization level, that an individual organization goes through is underestimated. And so in order to be successful or most efficient or effective at your transformation, these questions help stir and get your mind going in that way. One thing I'd like to say is, think of it this way. The world, the static world that we know, is no longer. It's a dynamic world, and it's a global world, and you're competing with all companies across the globe, regardless of what industry you're at, or what market you're in. That's just the fact now. I have a small entrepreneur who makes O-rings, little plastic O-rings. He's competing with China. He's out of New Hampshire, good friend of mine, entrepreneur company. So that's a great example of even our small entrepreneurs across the US are facing the same challenges the Fortune 100 companies are now in this global dynamic world. So what I'd like to leave you with is, think of it this way. The competitive advantage that you have, your ability to beat your competition, is directly related to how efficient and effective and smoothly you can get through your DevOps transformation or adoption. What I mean by that is, everybody's going to have to transform. Everybody's moving from static to dynamic. So what separates the companies out there today, and who's going to be the leader, who's going to be that market leader, who's going to be the industry leader, who's going to have the most profitability, who's going to have the most gains, ROI, boils down to who has the most effective and efficient and reducing the cycle time in the transformation. So that's what I'd like to leave you with. So, parting words for myself is, good luck on your journey. DASA and I are, as myself as a DASA ambassador, and DASA, we're here to help everybody, serve you guys, and let the transformation journey begin, as I always like to say.